The Leo Tolstoy Countdown, 8 novels to rule his literary empire. Leo Tolstoy was not just a novelist, he was a moralist, a mystic, a chronicler of the soul's slow transformations. His books throb with life, duels and dances, births and deaths, great battles and quiet epiphanies. To read him is to be reminded of how messy and magnificent existence can be. Choosing his 8 greatest novels is like trying to choose the finest rooms in a palace where every chamber has its own splendor. But choose we must, and because anticipation is half the pleasure, we begin at number 8 and ascend to the towering masterpiece at number 1. 8. The Cossacks, 1863. Written when Tolstoy was in his early 30s, The Cossacks draws directly from his own military service in the Caucasus. Tolstoy had volunteered for the army partly to escape gambling debts and the stifling etiquette of aristocratic life, and partly to find real life away from the drawing rooms of Moscow. The novel is steeped in that yearning for authenticity. Its protagonist, Olenin, is a young aristocrat bored by the idle chatter and shallow romances of his social circle. He heads to the Terek River region, imagining he will become a new man amid the vigor and bravery of the Cossack people. At first, he is intoxicated by the wild beauty of the mountains, the physical vitality of the villagers, and the apparent purity of their way of life. Tolstoy's nature writing here is some of his most sensual. Sunsets bleeding into purple hills, the smell of wild herbs on the wind, the swift glint of fish in the shallows. Yet beneath this romantic imagery is the slow erosion of Olenin's illusions. He is drawn to the Cossack girl Maryanka, but can never truly cross the invisible barrier between himself and the community. By the novel's end, Olenin has learned, painfully, that you cannot shed your identity merely by changing your surroundings. The dream of becoming someone entirely new collapses under the weight of ingrained habits and the subtle borders between us and them. Why number 8? Because it is a beautifully crafted prelude to the larger moral dramas Tolstoy would later stage. The Cossacks may be a minor Tolstoy in scope, but it hums with the themes, self-deception, yearning, the limits of transformation that define his mature work. 7th Resurrection, 1899. If The Cossacks is Tolstoy's youthful idealism in ink, Resurrection is the voice of the aging prophet. Written when he was 70, it is his last major novel and is most overtly moralistic. By this point, Tolstoy had undergone his famous spiritual crisis, renounced his copyrights, abandoned most worldly pleasures, and devoted himself to a radical form of Christian anarchism. The novel begins with a moral jolt. Prince Dmitry Nekhlyudov, serving on a jury, realizes that the defendant, Katerina Maslova, is the same woman he seduced and abandoned years earlier. Once a naive servant girl, she has been driven into prostitution and now faces a murder charge. Nekhlyudov is flooded with guilt and resolves to make amends, not just with her, but with himself. The book becomes a journey through the Russian legal and penal systems, exposing corruption, cruelty, and indifference at every turn. Tolstoy gives us harrowing scenes of overcrowded prisons, the monotonous grind of hard labor, and the bureaucratic absurdities that doom the powerless. While the love story between Nekhlyudov and Maslova threads through the narrative, the real love affair here is Tolstoy's with justice. Justice stripped of its legal formalities and rooted instead in compassion and personal responsibility. Why number 7? Because while Resurrection can feel heavy-handed, Tolstoy's didactic streak is in full force. Its moral passion is undeniable. It is the work of a man who had shed all interest in polite society and was determined to confront injustice head-on. 6. Childhood, Boyhood and Youth, 1852 to 1856. Before the epics came the apprenticeship. This autobiographical trilogy, Childhood, Boyhood, and Youth, traces the growth of Nikolai Ertenev, a stand-in for young Tolstoy. The first installment, Childhood, was published when Tolstoy was just 23. Russian literary circles were startled by its freshness. Here was an aristocrat who could write with unvarnished honesty about fear, embarrassment, pride, and longing. These were not grand historical events, but the intimate dramas of a child's world. Across the three novellas, we see Nikolai navigate school friendships, the death of a parent, adolescent crushes, and the slow awakening to the hypocrisies of adult life. Tolstoy's genius for detail is already evident. The sound of a cricket in a warm room, the look a teacher gives that cuts more deeply than any punishment, the mix of pride and shame in a child's first moral choice. There's also a fascinating foreshadowing of later Tolstoy here. The young Nikolai's alternation between self-loathing and moral ambition mirrors the internal struggles of Pierre in War and Peace, or Levin in Anna Karenina. Why number 6? Because these novellas give us the seedbed of all Tolstoy's later themes: the yearning for moral clarity, the inability to sustain it, and the beauty and pain of self-awareness. 5. The Death of Ivan Ilyich, 1886. This novella may be short, but it has the weight of a cannonball. The Death of Ivan Ilyich opens not with Ivan's life, but with his death, and the bureaucratic, faintly callous way his colleagues react to the news. We then flash back to see how he lived, diligently, respectably, conventionally. Ivan's life is a model of middle-class propriety, right down to the furniture chosen to impress visitors. His marriage is loveless, but socially advantageous. His career is steady, but uninspired. Then a mysterious illness strikes, and the veneer of normality shatters. Tolstoy's depiction of Ivan's physical decline is unflinching. The pain, the indignities, the shrinking of his world to the dimensions of a sick room. But the deeper horror is existential, the realization that his life has been hollow, guided by fear of disapproval rather than genuine conviction. In the final pages, Ivan undergoes a spiritual breakthrough. Facing death, he abandons fear, forgives those around him, and feels a strange joy in his last moments. Why number 5? Because it distills Tolstoy's lifelong obsession, how to live rightly, into fewer than 100 pages. It is both universal and intimate, terrifying and consoling. 4th, Haji Murat, published posthumously in 1912. Tolstoy's last work of fiction is one of his most gripping. Haji Murat is based on the real-life Avar rebel who fought against Russian forces in the Caucasus before defecting to them, hoping to rescue his family from a rival. The novel captures the clash between empires and mountain tribes with a journalist's eye for detail. We get vivid descriptions of the terrain: snow-capped peaks, muddy passes, hidden villages, and battle scenes that thrum with tension. Yet what makes Haji Murat remarkable is its refusal to simplify. Murat is brave and charismatic, but also calculating. His enemies are brutal, but not without humanity. Tolstoy's moral compass here points toward complexity, the idea that in war, no side has a monopoly on virtue. There is also a sense of elegy in Haji Murat. Written in his 70s, Tolstoy knew he was nearing his own end. The story's closing image, a beautiful thistle crushed by a cartwheel, feels like a metaphor for all lives caught in the machinery of history. Why number 4? Because it blends the grandeur of his epics with the clarity of his later moral vision. It's a late-career gem that shows Tolstoy's artistry was as sharp as ever. 3. Anna Karenina, 1877. Tolstoy called Anna Karenina his first true novel, and it remains a masterpiece of structure, psychological depth, and social observation. From its famous opening line, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way," the novel lays out its dual concern: the private passions that can shatter lives and the public codes that pass judgment. Anna's love affair with Count Vronsky is rendered with aching intensity, from their first charged meeting to the desperate final scenes at the train station. Running alongside is the quieter, more hopeful story of Konstantin Levin, whose search for purpose and connection mirrors Tolstoy's own. The scope is dazzling: glittering balls in St. Petersburg, threshing wheat in the country, debates about agrarian reform, childbirth, betrayal, spiritual renewal. Tolstoy moves among these worlds with apparent effortlessness. Why number 3? Because it is one of the greatest novels in any language. That it ranks third here is less a criticism than a tribute to the staggering heights Tolstoy would reach elsewhere. Second, Sevastopol Sketches, 1855. Though not a novel in the strictest sense, this series of linked narratives deserves its high placement. Based on Tolstoy's own service during the Crimean War, the Sevastopol Sketches show us siege warfare without romantic gloss. Tolstoy depicts soldiers at rest, civilians under bombardment, officers torn between duty and fear. Death comes suddenly, often absurdly, and heroism is mingled with vanity and blunder. In one scene, a soldier dies after bravely manning a cannon, only for his body to be unceremoniously pushed aside so the gun can keep firing. Here we see the birth of Tolstoy's moral voice, the rejection of war's glamour, the insistence on the individual's experience over nationalistic myth. Without these sketches, war and peace would not exist. Why number 2? Because they mark the moment Tolstoy found his lifelong subject, the human soul under pressure from history. 1. War and Peace, 1869. And so we reach the summit. War and Peace is not just Tolstoy's masterpiece, it is, for many, the greatest novel ever written. Its scope is almost unimaginable, over 500 characters, a decade of Russian history, battles and romances, philosophy and domestic comedy. The main threads follow Pierre Bezukhov, Natasha Rostov, and Prince Andrei Bolkonsky as they navigate love, loss, and the cataclysm of Napoleon's invasion. Tolstoy marries the intimacy of psychological realism with the sweep of epic history. He can shift from the thunder of the Battle of Borodino to a moment as small as Natasha singing in a candlelit room, and make both feel equally momentous. The novel also contains some of Tolstoy's most provocative reflections on history, free will, and the meaning of life. His view that history is driven not by great men, but by countless small actions was revolutionary for its time. Why number 1? Because it contains multitudes, a love story, a war chronicle, a philosophical treatise, and a portrait of an entire society. Every reread offers new revelations. Final thoughts: the art of Tolstoy's ranking. Tolstoy's greatness lies in the harmony of many qualities: moral seriousness without moralizing at his best, empathy without sentimentality, realism without cynicism. From the youthful adventure of the Cossacks to the panoramic sweep of war and peace, these 8 works trace a life's journey, not just Tolstoy's, but ours. To read them is to engage in a conversation across centuries about what it means to live well, love deeply, and face the end with honesty.